Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 647, Sinful Strait 2. Boom. The waves crashed violently, rising several meters into the air before slamming down with explosive force. Water sprayed over the surroundings, drenching the merchant and Inaz, who both instinctively slowed their steps, as if the sea itself was trying to push them back. This is crazy. Inaz covered his face with his arm as he looked ahead, trying his best to see through the dense droplets of water that sprayed in the air. Each time a wave crashed against the rock, a thunderous boom echoed through the air, and the expressions on Inaz and the merchant's faces grew increasingly grim. Eventually, Inaz's head lifted towards the massive, jagged black cliffs as he thought of something and suggested, instead of going into the strait, why don't we just directly climb up and see how the situation there is? We can also overlook the strait from above. The idea was good and it made sense. It also felt a lot less dangerous. Plus, if the other lords are trying to set up an ambush, I'd say that would be the perfect place to do it. I would certainly set it up there. Inaz felt that his reasoning was good. And thus, as he looked at Lazarus, he hoped that he'd agree, but no. The merchant didn't even hesitate to shake his head while staring at the strait. Inaz immediately protested. What? Why? The boat won't be going from up. It will be going directly into the strait. There's also the fog present that makes it hard to see what is happening below. Going up would simply be a waste of time. But there's also no need for us to go there directly. Lazarus raised his hand as an owl appeared. Inaz's face sank as Lazarus raised his hand and the owl shot in the air. I've got someone else who can take care of this job perfectly. Staring at the owl, what could Inaz even say? He just really wanted to go up. It seemed a lot better than whatever was inside the strait. I really can't have a moment of peace with this guy. Let's go. There's no time to waste. And so, Inaz could only begrudgingly follow the merchant toward the strait, residual waves splashing over them as they moved forward, unfazed by the crimson water that splashed towards them. Boom. Boom. The relentless roar of the waves grew louder and more overpowering the closer they drew to the strait. By the time they crossed its threshold, the booming was nearly deafening, like someone pounding a drum right beside their ears. It felt uncomfortable, but the two were able to ignore it as they entered the strait, letting the fog slowly consume them. Then, darkness. Everything turned dark, with Inaz just barely capable of seeing ahead as he made out the faint silhouette of the merchant. Stay close. Don't stray too far from me. As the crashing sound of the waves grew muffled, Lazarus's voice became more audible. I wasn't planning to. Inaz moved cautiously as the fog grew thicker with the steps that they took, the water rippling right beneath their feet. A certain chill spread through, making Inaz shiver slightly. The cold was followed by an uncomfortable smell that lingered in the air. It was different from the usual iron-like scent. This smell. It felt more rotten. But what exactly could the smell be? Inaz looked around, but had a hard time seeing much ahead as the fog was incredibly thick. The darkness also swallowed them from all sides. He had just taken another step when Lazarus stopped, his hand waving in the air as he doubled the intensity of Lament of Lies. While Lazarus didn't notice anything yet, something about the environment left him completely unsettled. He couldn't quite describe it, but the sensation sent an involuntary shiver through his body, each breath leaving as a faint plume of mist, as if the very air around him echoed the unease settling in his bones. Lazarus looked around his surroundings, his eyes narrowing as he bent over slightly to touch the water. It's cold. Much colder than the water outside the strait. His lips pursed as he looked ahead. He didn't sense any presences as well. Though the fog was thick, it didn't prevent his mana sense from working. As such, he was acutely aware of the lack of living organisms nearby. Be it humans or monsters. He couldn't feel anything. Is it possible that they are hiding their mana? That was one way to make it hard for his skill to detect anyone. It had happened with the strange monster he had found lurking beneath the waters. Maybe a similar case was playing out here? Lazarus's eyes narrowed further at the thought. If that were really the case, then he had to be more careful and make sure to take in everything around him without missing a single detail. Drawing a silent breath, Lazarus continued forward while Inaz followed from behind, and Almighty followed from the top as it communicated with Pebble, who relayed everything to Lazarus. Like that, Lazarus and Inaz walked through the strait while keeping an eye on everything around them. The deeper they went into the strait, the more silent it became. The silence. It was so dense it pressed against their ears, broken only by the unnaturally loud ripples of their footsteps across the water. The two found themselves unconsciously slowing down. The entire time, Lazarus maintained mana sense while also sending out threads around him to scout the path forward. It wasn't until the two walked for a little bit more that Inaz's eyes dilated as he spotted something in the distance, and he pressed his hand over Lazarus's shoulder. That? Do you see it? I do. Lazarus nodded his head quietly, his breath pausing for a moment. Tensions grew from that point, with the two staring towards the distant water where they spotted something floating above it. The two stopped as they stared into the distance, trying to make out what the object floating on the water was. Should we wait? Lazarus held in his back as he used his mana sense to detect anything. However, it didn't appear like it contained any mana. As such, he used his threads to gently move them around the water and coil around the floating object before bringing it to him. As he began to reel it in, the water parted smoothly. The soft scrape of the object dragging across the water echoed eerily, and Inaz's body tensed without thinking. Eventually, arriving before them, Lazarus pulled the object up. Splash! The moment he did, Inaz's face changed. Inaz took a step back, his face turning pale as he stared at what appeared to be the hand of a person dangling by the thread as the grotesque image of the severed limb imprinted itself in his mind. Inaz felt his heart thump wildly within his chest as he looked at the merchant, who showed no emotion at the sight. And it made sense considering that they had seen much worse during their fight prior. However, the reason why Inaz grew tense wasn't because he found the image repulsive, but because of the location they were in. Looking at the severed hand, it still seemed fresh, meaning that whatever had caused the situation was still present. We should go, I think. Inaz was never able to finish his words as he saw the merchant stare into the distance, his expression extremely grave. When Inaz turned his head, his face similarly changed as he spotted several objects floating across the water surface in the distance. The more they walked, the more they appeared, and as Lazarus leered them in, Inaz felt the breath leave his body. That was because another arm. This time a leg. Another arm. It's different. A head. They all appeared to be the remains of people. There were so many of them and also fresh. Staring at the scene, the sense of unease grew more and more as Inaz looked towards the merchant, his sense of urgency now impossible to hide. We have to leave? Something about this entire situation is off. I think that. Splash. As Lazarus retrieved another object from the water, Inaz stopped. His face. No, not just his face. His entire body froze. Staring at the head that was being lifted by the merchant, Inaz blinked his eyes slowly, hoping that what he was seeing was just an illusion. However, as he blinked his eyes and the face remained the same, the sense of dread that had been creeping before him heightened to an extreme as he quickly turned around, grabbing the merchant by the shoulder and pulling him. We have to go now. The fear in his voice was all too evident, his tone trembling as well as his body. Go as fast as you can, hurry. Ripples formed on the water surface as he dashed towards the entrance of the strait with all his might. We have to run, we have to run. Inaz's panic was unmistakable, his breaths rough, every hair on his body standing on end as an invisible weight pressed down on him. The sense of dread crept forward like cold fingers slithering up his spine, reaching from behind, invisible but unmistakably close, as though something just out of sight was leaning in to grasp him. There's no doubt that's him. I'm sure that's him. Running forward, Inaz thought about the head and then all the bodies that were scattered throughout the water. He was unsure at first, but now he was certain. Those bodies. They belonged to the Volpun Raiders, one of the 7 major pirate crews that roamed the Crimson Seas, led by the infamous Deadbolt Volpun. And that very last head he saw. That one belonged to none other than Deadbolt Volpun, one of the 7 Lords of the Sea. Oh no! Chapter 648, Fog of Temptation, 1. Ha! Ha! Heavy breathing echoed through the strait as Inaz rushed ahead, his footsteps stirring ripples in his wake. His heart pressed heavily against his chest as he moved ahead, an intense sense of dread washing over his mind. We need to leave now. He didn't know what was going on, but for one of the 7 lords to be killed like this, it couldn't be anything good. Ha! Ha! As his rough breathing echoed throughout the otherwise silent strait, Inaz turned his head to look behind him, hoping to see Lazarus following from behind, but ha! Inaz stopped, his eyes blinking as his chest grew heavier. He was nowhere in sight. Wah! Wah! Where did he go? Inaz quietly swallowed, his lips pressed into a thin line as he scanned his surroundings. To his shock and rising dread, the fog had thickened so drastically that he could barely see beyond a few meters. With the darkness already pressing in, he felt utterly blind. He was alone and blind. The silence around him heightened as his breathing grew even rougher. Oh no! Looking around, Inaz found himself losing all sense of orientation as he had trouble finding his bearings. Was I running this way or this way? He looked all over, but felt completely lost. His face sank and his heart sped. I need to stay calm. Calm. Inaz secretly prayed to the goddess while he moved a little forward, hoping to spot the side of the strait. So long as he managed to find that, he'd at least have some sort of bearing. There. Thankfully, it wasn't too far from him as he managed to spot the rough and tall rock surface. Placing his hand over it and feeling the cool touch of the rock, he slowly lifted his head and looked up. His eyes lit up. Right, who said that I have to move along the strait? I can just move up. I'm sure that Merchant is also doing the same thing. It was the most logical and safe route. Inaz pressed a hand against the rough outer rock, found a secure hold, and hauled himself upward. With his current physique, climbing a tall cliff was an easy task as his movements were nimble. Even if he didn't find any foothold, he could just make one. Yes, this is much easier. A smile formed on Inaz's features as he slowly climbed up. However, splash! The moment he climbed up, the top of his head seemed to hit the surface of the water as it suddenly became submerged. Yuhak! It was as if the world had suddenly flipped. Jotting his head out of the water, Inez looked around to see his entire body deep within the dark crimson waters of the strait. What the hell happened? He looked ahead to see the rock surface he was climbing. Wah! Wasn't he just climbing it? How in the world did that happen? The sense of unease and dread that Inez had been feeling grew even more pronounced at this very moment as he looked at the rock surface before him with deep apprehension. Don't tell me. No, maybe I just lost my bearings. I'll try again. Clenching his teeth, Inez reached for the rock once more, dragging himself out of the water to resume his climb. This time, he didn't bother searching for a foothold. He slammed his foot against the rock face, carving a path upward through force alone. If something went wrong, he wanted to know exactly where and why. He was also a lot faster than before. Inez believed that speed could have been the key. But, splash! Yet again, his face sank into the water and the world around him flipped. Resurfacing out of the water, Inez looked towards the rock surface and his entire face changed when he stared at it. There. He could still see the markings he had left on the rock surface. They moved up before slowly, taking a turn and moving back down towards the water. Almost as if forming a U shape. What? Inez grew slack at the scene. He was having a hard time understanding the scene. He understood what had happened, but what he didn't understand was how he didn't notice any of this. It felt as though he had been climbing up the entire time. How did? Inez, what are you doing here? Inez's thoughts were stopped by an abrupt whisper. His head flicked back, but he saw nothing. With his entire body growing rigid, Inez quickly got out of the water as he stood above its surface. His eyes scanned the surroundings with deep apprehension. And then, splash! A hand shot out from the water, grasping Inez's ankle directly. Inez didn't even manage to get any words out before a figure he was all too familiar with popped out from the water. Inez! Don't leave your mother alone. It's been so long. Not far from Inez, calmly walking the surface of the waters, Lazarus looked at his surroundings. It was calm, and the darkness around him had completely swallowed up his vision. In spite of this, he didn't look at all fazed. With his connection with Almighty still there, he knew exactly where he needed to go. However, soon. Lazarus's brows furrowed. Something about this place feels odd. He couldn't quite put it into words as he looked around. The fog had seemingly grown denser, and all noise ceased. All at once, it was as if every sense but touch and smell had been stripped away. The biting cold still clung to him, seeping into his skin, and the stench of decay grew stronger. Lazarus came to a stop as he observed his surroundings. His eyes eventually paused towards the distance, where he felt a strange disturbance. His mana started to circulate, and Pebble appeared right next to him, its pupil small as he looked towards the distance. Soon, the faint image of a silhouette appeared. It drew closer and closer to him until their features were revealed. With unmistakable gray eyes that he could never forget and a face that could only be described as stupid, Leon appeared, his face a little pale and his body disheveled. Meeting Lazarus's gaze, his eyes shook. I finally found you. His voice trembled as the two's eyes met. Do you know how much I've gone through to look for you? Do you know how much I've struggled? His voice was frail and his face turned even paler. If it weren't for my sharp senses, it would have taken me longer. But I figured it out. Even if you erase my memories, I'd still know what you did. You weren't exactly subtle about it. I've had my suspicions, but I was right. You are still alive. Leon's face shook as he looked at Lazarus. You are still alive. He began to laugh, although his laugh felt forced. You won't believe how much. How cheap. Lazarus cut through Leon's words as his hazy eyes looked ahead. Staring at the figure, he felt nothing. Though his finger trembled, he felt nothing. He just saw a figure that appeared to have been close to the guy he had once been. But Julian was no longer here. He was Lazarus, and as such, retrieving his sword, he directly swiped it in the direction of Leon. Swoosh. What? What are you doing? His body was severed in half, fading into the fog. The coldness in Lazarus's eyes turned deeper as he took another step forward. But as he did, several more figures appeared. Fucker, that shit was harsh. What are you doing? Why are you attacking Leon like that? Do you know how hard it was for us to find you? Why are you doing this to us? What is wrong with you? Lazarus recognized all of them. Kira, Evelyn, Aoife. The three appeared out of nowhere, their figures similarly battered. It almost looked like they had gone through a tough struggle to get to where he was. And yet Lazarus's face remained impassive. He raised his hand again and swiped down. Swoosh! Their figures were sliced in half once more. As if the familiar figures had no effect on him, Lazarus continued to move forward, Pebble whispering to him things as he moved towards the right path. More familiar figures continued to show up before Lazarus. Kalian. Swoosh. Caius. Swoosh. Linus. Swoosh. Whoever stood in his way was sliced in half. His eyes remained unmoved and his spirit unbroken. No illusion could affect his mind. That was until... Be brother. Noel showed up. For just a moment, Lazarus's feet slowed. It was just a moment, but that moment was present, and as if sensing the weakness, the fog grew denser. Be brother. Please help me. I need your help. Esithris, he's found me. I. Lazarus's heart skipped a beat, his hands slowly balling into fists as his knuckles turned white. Brother, please. Noel drew even closer than before, his body showing signs of injuries. Slowly holding onto his chest, he took another step towards Lazarus. However, just as he drew closer, Lazarus raised his hand and sliced down. Swoosh! Why? Noel was similarly sliced in half. Lazarus's eyes turned cloudy at the sight before taking another step forward, but it was then that another figure showed up. Her glossy black hair fluttered in silence as her deep black eyes, deeper than the darkness around them, fell on him. Why? She mumbled, her eyes shaky and her expression pale. Why? Lazarus stopped once more. However, this time he couldn't move. He found himself unable to move, his heart pulsing with more intensity than it had ever done before. He stared at the figure standing before him, his expression slowly starting to change before settling back to normal. Even before everyone else he remained steadfast. Even before his brother. Even before Leon. But before her. Lazarus felt his insides stir as his face paled. Do you love me? Delilah moved forward, a tear tracing down her cheek as she took slow and steady steps towards him. You left me. I know it's my fault, but you left me. The tears streamed down her face as she moved closer to him. She felt so vivid. So clear that for a moment, the deep haze within Lazarus's eyes faded. He started to show emotions. And soon, Delilah stopped before him, her thin finger pressing up against his chin and slowly lifting it. Her lips pursed as the two stared at each other. Until she slowly moved her head down. Lazarus's eyes shook at the sight, his eyes closing to meet her gesture. But then, the haze returned. And his heart stopped. Gradually opening his eyes, he clenched his hand and sliced down. He could never forget the look of shock and betrayal on her face as he sliced down on her. Swoosh! What? Why? Lazarus could only shake his head while taking a step forward. I am not him. His voice calmly echoed through the fog. I had once felt, but now I'm unmoved. It came almost as a whisper, yet it cut through the fog like a blade. This is what makes me, me. The haze completely took over his eyes. Lazarus. Chapter 649, Fog of Temptation 2. And as, there's no need to worry about a little injury like this. Bleeding just helps get the bad blood out. Trust your mom, all right? And as could still recall his mother's comforting words. The words she used to say whenever he got hurt or injured as a child. The mirror dimension was a treacherous place. It was a place where survival was a luxury. And yet somehow he had managed to live all the way until his current age, 28. One could say he was lucky. But was he really? Mom. Enes stared at the figure clinging to his ankle, his eyes trembling. He recognized her at a glance. How could he not recognize the woman who had birthed him and taken care of him since young? Enes. The kind smile was also there. The warm one that she would always give him. My son, how are you doing? Her voice trembled as she looked at him from below. Staring at her, Enes felt his body grow weaker. How long had it been since he had last seen her? His chest trembled, his lips shaking. A certain pain he had long forgotten resurfaced in his chest as he looked at her. How? How are you here, Mom? You're supposed to be dead. He had merely been 15 when she died. It was a disease that took her life. In order to provide for him and make sure that he would survive, she took several odd jobs. The jobs were harsh. Haha. You don't have to worry about me, Enes. I'm fine. This is okay. Are you full? There's more if you want. I'm fine. Just enjoy yourself. One day I'm sure you can help me. It's good. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And has always remembered his mom for the same exact words she would always tell him. I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. As a child, he didn't fully understand, but even then he could see the slow deterioration in her face. Her once beautiful skin grew pale and sunken, and the voice that used to ring like a morning bell became hoarse and brittle. And yet again, her words were, I'm fine. A simple I'm fine that Enes had grown to hate. No, she wasn't fine. How could she be fine? But what could he even do? He tried to work, but he was weak. His mother's state deteriorated and he grew desperate. Desperate to the point where he found himself selling his own organs. That was all he could offer. It was all he was worth. Cough. Cough. Mom here. Have this. Enes. Don't speak. Just eat. The money was enough for him to support his sick mother. For once, Enes didn't feel so useless. He felt useful. Wanted. Appreciated. He continued to feed his mother, but her condition never seemed to improve. Mom, just stay. Let me take care of you. When money ran dry, he'd sell something else. To take care of his mother, Enes was willing to sacrifice this much. But Enes, lost completely in his own plight, Enes didn't even realize the look his mother was giving him. He was just so mindlessly focused on taking care of her that he didn't notice the look that she gave him that day. He only came to realize it once it was too late. She had taken her own life. And no. It was as if his entire world came crashing down that day. The sole reason for his life, gone. Just like that. On that day, Enes remained stuck in the very same room her mother was in. He didn't move. He couldn't move. He could only stare at her. Completely lost. And by the time he regained himself, he found himself standing in front of a large mirror. That was when he saw it. His own reflection. Pale face, sunken cheeks, sunken eyes. Is that me? Inez was at a loss while staring at the reflection. It looked nothing like he did in the past. He was completely different. He looked more like Mom. And that was when it finally hit him. She was just like him. To keep him alive, she sold the things that shouldn't have been sold. The things that were meant for them and them only. And it was that moment of realization that drove Inez to despair. His entire body grew numb. On that day, he lost all reason to live. He was just a mindless corpse. One that roamed the streets of Virithanash, just waiting for his eventual death. He was numb to everything. Even pain. No, but there were times he felt it. Times when the cuts in his arm made him feel something. But then, he'd recall his mother's words. Inez, there's no need to worry about a little injury like this. Bleeding just helps get the bad blood out. Trust your mom, all right? Inez forced a smile each time. Staring at the blood seeping out from his dried-up skin, he started to wonder if he was made of nothing else. His days grew numbered until the darkness finally took over his vision. Finally he could go. Finally he could return to his mother. He could. What are you doing? In the midst of his darkness, he saw a light. A light so intense it nearly blinded him. When he managed to open his eyes again, he was met with a sight that felt like staring into the sun itself. It was so bright, so warm, and so delicate. It was also then that Inez recalled that on that day, the living saint of the Temple of Light would come to Virithanash. At that moment, their eyes met. He was looking straight at him. Straight to someone like him, and his hand reached towards him. It looks like you've allowed the world to defeat you. His voice was just as warm. But you're in luck. The hand pulled him back up. The goddess does not care about your origin or status. The goddess cares for everyone deeply. I'm her direct emissary. My words are hers and my care is hers. So, I hope we see each other again soon. I hope you aspire to be someone who will one day share the same love that the goddess has. And as his life changed from that moment, the temple took him in. They fed him. They provided him with a shelter, clothes, new organs, and ambition. His life changed drastically from that moment. It was also in that moment that he started to worship the goddess. She was his everything. His life. He wanted to repay her kindness. Without her, he would have long succumbed to the darkness. His mindless drive for the goddess stemmed from that point. She was there at his lowest point. She picked him up and she made him new again. His blood was no longer bad and he was now whole again. For the goddess. For the goddess. For the goddess. The goddess was all he thought about and his sole driving force. And it's been so long since we've last seen each other. As his mother's voice echoed again from below, Inez's lips stopped trembling. This was an illusion. His mother was dead. That part of him was also dead. He now had a new goal. A new ambition. I'm sorry. And as such, he pulled his foot back. Inez. His mother's voice shook almost as though she was heartbroken. Inez's shoulders trembled, but he resisted. This wasn't his mother. His mother was dead. He wasn't the same old Inez. To him, the goddess was his everything. He couldn't fall for the illusion's tricks. Inez didn't look back and moved across the water surface. Why are you doing this to me, Inez? You're breaking my heart. Inez? His mother's voice continued to whisper from behind him, but Inez remained indifferent to it. Or at least, made it seem like it. However, just a small part of him wanted to listen to his mother. The woman whom he had once loved with his being. Inez. Her voice eventually turned into screams as she called for him. But Inez didn't look back. He couldn't allow himself to look back. He had to keep moving forward. Forget about everything and splash. Inez's face changed as a hand streaked out of the water, grasping his ankle again. Before Inez could even react again, another hand shot out from the water and went on to grasp his other foot. What the? Inez's eyes shook as he grew alert. Looking down, he could see his mother appear. She was staring at him menacingly, her face twisted. Next to her was himself. Or more like, the hollow version of what he once used to be. He too was staring at him with the same twisted look his mother was giving him. What are you doing? Why are you running away? Come back. Come back to your mother. You need to support her. What are you doing? Inez felt his breath leave his body as more and more hands shot out from the water, reaching out and grasping for him. No, no. He tried to shake their influence away, but the more hands came grasping and reaching for him, the harder it was for him to move. They wrapped around his body, tangling tightly and clinging to him stubbornly. No matter how much he tried to resist, he couldn't. And slowly. No, no. He was being pulled deep into the water. Shit, no. Inez's hands flailed wildly as he reached for anything, something to keep him from slipping into the water. But no matter how desperately he searched, he found nothing. The cold crept in slowly, wrapping around his body until it consumed him entirely. New. His screams echoed throughout the fog as he was eventually swallowed up by the water. As his figure completely faded from view, several ripples formed across the water as a figure eventually stopped on the spot where Inez used to be, looking down directly. His eyes shone faintly before he closed his eyes. There's only so much I can do. Lazarus mumbled, his body calm. He had been watching for a while, and although he could have helped, he decided not to. At least not yet. This was something that Inez had to figure out for himself. If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.